comes Scoring Explosion, where we talk all things about our offense, and we are breaking down the offense by position groups, right, Honky?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get started here with the quarterbacks. And by the way, if you like this content, click the like button here on YouTube here. We're going to be breaking these videos out into individual segments. So if you're watching this later on YouTube and you're watching just the quarterbacks, know that we're also doing one for running backs and wide receivers, tight ends, and offensive line tonight. And so we'll try to keep these about 5-10 minutes each and kind of go from there. But this is pretty much the roster right now. And for some of these position groups, it's not going to be everybody that's on the field or on the team right now, like in spring. This is just what we have right now from a scholarship standpoint on the roster. Now, with the quarterbacks, all 6 of these guys are here right now, so that does make it easier. Coach Rule talked today about Casey Thompson, basically saying he's not going to be doing much more than maybe a little bit of throwing in spring ball, so don't have any expectations for him here in April of seeing him running around taking hits or anything like that. But what we have from a roster standpoint is Casey Thompson, the starter, coming back. He's the lone senior, 6 feet, 195. Behind him, Jeff Sims. He's the transfer, the junior, 6'4", 220 from Georgia Tech. Logan Smothers, junior, 6'2", 190. He's been in the program now like 4 years, and he had a start against Iowa a couple years ago. Heinrich Hardberg, the in-state kid from Kearney, sophomore, 6'5", 210. Chubba Purdy, sophomore, 6'2", 210. And then Richard Torres, the redshirt freshman from Texas, 6'4", 215. So, Dave, I guess jumping off the page right away, I mean, that's a lot of names.
It's a lot of names. They're all still here, which is awesome. Hopefully there's some competition. Even without Casey out there, you still have 5 guys with a brand new playbook. Jeff Sims definitely has a lot of starting experience coming from Georgia Tech, and with a new playbook, it's kind of a level playing field, but some of these players like Logan Smothers have built-in relationships with the teammates here, so I'm sure Jeff Sims will be working hard on that and kind of see where it goes. I think it's going to be interesting, and I think we got a comment in saying that we're going to still need green jerseys. So I suppose it's probably true, but with 5 guys, I'd like to see a little bit of competition here, however that plays out, right, Honky? I mean, I don't think we need to treat these guys with too much caution.
No, I mean, I'm going to go back to what I said about the practice to begin with. I think you have to have some balance there. Again, let's not have a bloodbath and beat these guys up every single day, but at the same time, you have to have a legitimate competition, and they're going to have some scrimmages, and these guys are going to take some hits. I'm confident in this. They're going to take some hits in a couple of those scrimmages at the times that they need to. And I think that's a way that you're going to be able to filter through who is number 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. I'm not giving anything to Casey right now either. He's not just a de facto starter no matter what. I mean, he's going to have to show something at some point. And I understand coming off injury, he doesn't get that chance to right away. But there's a lot of guys here that are going to be fighting for that spot. And even today, Coach Rule talked about the athleticism of Purdy and Harbor, 2 guys that have stood out athletically, and that's not even talking about a guy like Sims, who that's what he's known for coming here from Georgia Tech. So there's some real
straight line speed like Smothers, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's some legitimate athleticism in this room.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how the GPS timing works. It's kind of interesting that all the players have GPS systems, and it's probably not just 40-yard dash times here they're talking about. But Boomer, let's hypothetically say that since Casey Thompson's out, the real competition here between Jeff Sims and Logan Smothers, the 2 quarterbacks with the most playing experience. Now, I guess Chubba might be right in that same boat with Logan, but they're pretty similar. But with 6 quarterbacks on the roster, you think eventually there might be some attrition that may occur here before the first game in Minneapolis come next August. Would you be interested to see Rule and his staff let Harburg and Purdy and Torres, really, play some physical football here and see who can kind of, operate in a real football condition in spring ball here to actually create some of that separation? Because if you don't have enough of those kind of like game-like situations to evaluate, you're kind of still at the same point,
Yeah, I mean, but like you said, they do have some, footage of Smothers and Purdy playing, so that I think they know what they've got to some degree there. But I definitely think if you are those players, you certainly want that kind of practice. You want something to be able to show how you can separate yourself from the rest of the crowd. And I am kind of with you, Dave. I'm surprised all the players, these 6 are still here. I did kind of expect to see at least one, enter the transfer portal, just given the nature of the game these days and, opportunities elsewhere.
Yep.
I would probably bet we'll see one after spring ball, once kind of the pecking order has been, shaked out. And, the staff brought in Sims for a reason, so they must like what they see there, either as the starter or the backup. And, there'll be other quarterbacks coming in, as well as with recruiting classes. So I think there is probably going to be some attrition, but that's just the nature of the game nowadays.
Yeah, and I'll direct this question to Boomer, but Honky or Rob, if you know the answer, remind me on like the transfer rules when it's a second time. For example, with Chubba Purdy, is he locked in here a little bit more because he can't have a free transfer out and play right away? You would have to sit out a year. Or with Casey Thompson, I mean, was it already a grad transfer to get him here?
Yeah, he was a grad transfer,
right?
Yeah.
The rules can get a little different when you have a coach just leave. So Purdy, right after Frost left, Purdy potentially, I think, could have left again with that being the reason because of a coaching change. But now that we're, months after that, I don't know if that even applies anymore at this point. And then, it would get to the point if it's like if you're a senior transferring, there could be some senior rules. But so someone like Purdy, who's, a sophomore, who isn't graduating yet from undergrad, I think it would be if he transferred right now, he'd have to have some kind of waiver. There'd have to be some reason why he'd be able to play right away. He'd have to, sit out a season the way that the rules work there. But yeah, I just, to go back to the contact piece or the competition piece, it's amazing to me what we have from an experience standpoint. I can't think of the last time we would have had 2 Power 5 starting quarterbacks at Georgia Tech and Texas that are 1 and 2 right now. And to have a third guy who has started against Iowa and have a fourth guy or a fifth guy, Purdy, who, wherever you put him, Purdy, he started a game at Florida State. I mean, that's a ridiculous amount of P5 starting experience across the board. And yet you still want to get a lot of film of these guys and you want to get them into competitive situations. We heard about that all offseason with the offseason program that they did about being competitive. You want to get them in competing competitions. Some of those are going to revolve around some contact and some of them are not going to be contact drills. But I think that's something that is really crucial. This is a huge room. I mean, let's just be frank about that. I can't believe we have 6 scholarship quarterbacks right now, and that is very unique. And I'd be interested to see, how many other programs are even close to this. We probably want to be at 4, just from a number standpoint. I don't think too many people even carry 5. So, we'll see. And the athleticism, one thing I do want to say that's interesting is that as Coach Rule talked today about, Harburg and how athletic he is, and you think back to last season where, Coach Whipple was wanting to play him at tight end. I'm not saying Harburg's going to be transferring, moving positions or anything, but that's one option for a guy too. I mean, it's not just, you're a quarterback or not, you're off the team. It could be something too, or if these guys are athletic enough, they could be moved around potentially, some of these guys. But it'll be fun to watch it play out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there actually have been some updated rules, I believe, for the transfer to answer that question, Dave. And it looks like sometime in January.
Rob, can you speak up? I'm not hearing you.
Oh, yeah. I said it looks like there have been some like updated transfer rules for a second time transfer. And now, I mean, it's going to require some pretty extraordinary circumstances in order for that to happen. Yeah. Like having to prove a demonstrated physical injury, illness, or mental health condition that necessitated the transfer, or I think it's exigent circumstances such as physical or sexual abuse to necessitate a transfer, things like that. So they're really trying to cut down on kids just like transferring to transfer.
Yeah, you get the one free transfer. I think that's always been the intent of that. So, and then
but so many people were doing it and then applying for like a second transfer and a waiver, and they're basically saying you can no longer.
Keith Daniels is on his 5th team,
Yeah. Yeah. So I think they're really trying to cut back on that for all sports, really.
I got you. All right.
Obviously.
Cool. All right. We want to move on to running backs.
Yep.
All right. Honky, let's run down the running backs.
Well, just like with the quarterback position, we really haven't had much movement. A lot of guys here, I'll go down the list, but a lot of these guys, I think we would have been concerned 2-3 months ago that we're going to lose this guy or that guy to the portal, and none of them have left. And so that's Anthony Grant, senior, 5'11", 200. Ramir Johnson, who is only a junior, but I swear he's been here 12 years, 5'10", 185. Gabe Irvin Jr., sophomore back, 6 feet, 215. A.J. Allen, the redshirt freshman. Now, he had the injury last year. But 5'11", 185, great to see him back. Emmett Johnson, who redshirted last year, the kid from Minnesota, 5'11", 190. And then the incoming freshman, I don't believe he's on campus right now, Quentin Ives, he's 6'2", 185.
All right, so we have 6 guys here. 4 of them we've seen in action. Do we know if A.J. Allen is in for spring here, considering the knee injury?
I don't think he brought them. I don't think he mentioned him today from a health standpoint. So I don't know what his status is. Anybody watching, if you know this, feel free to throw that in there. But I don't believe that he mentioned, gave an update if he's how much contact or whatever you'd be expecting from him.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, we saw some flashes from Allen last year before he went out. To get Anthony Grant back is great. And I mean, if we see some offensive line improvement, I think he's got some potential to get coached up to make sure he hits those holes. But it had some really promising games last year, right? Ramir, to your point, is a seasoned veteran and a good third down back. And Gabe has also shown some real potential there. So Rob, I mean, this actually looks like a pretty good room right here.
It does. I mean, outside of like Anthony Grant, I think it's going to be a really wide open room with the running backs. AJ, like you said, AJ Allen, I actually thought he was probably like the number 2 back last year before the injury, right? And then, but you've heard a couple of his coaches, and I've heard I think Sip talk about Gabe Irvin a lot, saying that he thinks he might fit in. I think it was him saying he would fit into. What he thinks the offense is going to look like next year. So, I mean, there's all kinds of these are the question marks I like, quite frankly, and we'll get to it later, but these aren't the same kind of question marks I think we'll have about like the offensive line. There's going to be a really good rotation next year for running backs. And it'll be interesting to see how they're going to be using that room. And if we're going to be doing, is there anybody on this roster right here that could possibly fill in at fullback, So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of excitement, but I still think Anthony Grant's going to be our what do you call it, workhorse, or what is the
bell cow?
Bell cow. Workhorse, bell cow,
warhorse, whatever. Right?
Yeah.
Sure.
Feral pig. I don't know, like whatever you're going to call him, but yeah.
Boomer, do you think that all 6 of these guys will be on the roster in August, or we have a little attrition here too?
That's certainly possible. I think basically all these running backs have, I think, something to prove coming off of last year.
Yeah.
I think all of them left, either, you got like A.J. Allen, who looked promising but was derailed by an injury. Anthony Grant started so well, but then, kind of tapered off as the season. I think he wants to show what he can do against, Big Ten competition. Ramir Johnson was on a milk carton for a huge chunk of the season last year. I had no idea. I didn't even know he was still on the team for part of it. So I think there's a lot that these guys want to prove, and I think they'll get this opportunity. So I am looking forward to seeing what they can all do and how they fit in with a new offense and a new scheme. So you might see somebody leave if after spring ball they don't fit. That's a possibility.
Sure. To that point, Boomer, you just mentioned about kind of the fit and the X's and O's. Honky, how do you see these the running back types here? We've got a couple of guys that are a little bit on the lighter side, the 185, and a few over the 200 pound number there. I mean, how do you kind of see, knowing what you've looked at with kind of the various different offenses that Matt Rule has run, how do they fit in?
Yeah, I don't, Rob mentioned something about the fullback, and I'm ecstatic about anything fullback related. I don't know that I see any one of these body type wise, filling into that. Just size wise, they're not necessarily huge dudes, but you're going to see there's ability within the rule offenses in the past to flank some of these guys out. I think there's definite ways to get 2 backs onto the field for the first time in a while, and maybe even 3 if you think of Ramir Johnson is all of a sudden going out and being a wide receiver,
Sure.
maybe still having a backfield that has 2 guys in the backfield. I mean, there's conceivable ways to doing it, but just at the very least finding ways to get 2 of these guys on the field at the same time. And last year was probably one of the most maddening seasons of that, where it was, 1 running back, 3 wide, 3 wide outs, and a tight end about every play. And I think the formation, the personnel, whether it's 12 personnel or 21 personnel or whatever, they can mix and match a few things a little bit more, or this staff will. And I think that's crucial. Anthony Grant started off last season so good. I mean, he was one of the top running backs in the country there through the first, 4 or 5 weeks, and then it just completely tapered off. And so I think what Boomer said about everyone having something to prove is really key. And Coach E.J. Barthel, I think what he has, he talked about how he loves this room, and he was so glad that, all these guys stuck around. He didn't feel like he needed to go into the portal for anybody. And this is a room of all of them where I think these guys having the benefit of a new set of eyes on them and everything could really help. And a new X's and O's scheme can really help these guys, because I think that they'll get a few more touches, a few more opportunities, and maybe a little bit different style of play might be able to give them a few more holes that they didn't have in the past.
Yeah. With Ramir and Gabe, this is probably their 3rd running backs coach in 3 years, right?
Yeah, and Applewhite was great. I don't have an issue with Applewhite at all there. It's just, I think scheme wise, I think we're gonna have a little more of a power scheme here, and we're gonna have a few more opportunities with how we align these guys, how we have different players on the field, some different personnel groupings. I think that's what's going to be really interesting, and could be something that can open some stuff up for him. But I would love to see, if nothing else, I would love to see Anthony Grant and A.J. Allen on the field at the same time in the same backfield once or twice. Right. I mean, the idea that never happened a year ago, I just think is such a wasted opportunity there, because a lot of these guys have talent that can stretch a defense, that can stress a defense, and they just need to get the opportunity there. And so they all have something to prove. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on, and let's talk about the wide receivers room. And this is a list, Talkie. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, this is where you get to 2 columns, and
barely can fit that in.
This looks like our coaching draft.
Yeah. And so, again, some of these freshmen here, even like Malachi Coleman, who's in Lincoln right now, but not at the university. So not all these guys are going to be going through spring practices. But let's start up on top here. Joshua Fleeks, the senior, he's the transfer from started off at Baylor with Coach Rule 4 or 5 years ago. 5'10", 190. Billy Kemp, the senior, 5'9", 180. He's the transfer from Virginia. A lot of good things that we'll get to him about. Marcus Washington, and we saw him have flashes last year. Senior, 6'2", 190. He's a transfer from Texas a year ago. Isaiah Garcia Castaneda, he's back. So I've got to say the words again. I kept screwing up his name all IGC. He's back. Junior, 6 feet, 185. Tommy Hill, junior, 6 feet, 200. He's been a defensive back. He's been on offense.
Did they move him back, Honky? I thought he was going back to the
You know
DBs.
what? I think I updated the graphic, and it didn't get updated here, because you're right. I heard that he went back to defense. So I think this graphic is old there. Xavier Betts, another guy that's now back on the team, sophomore, 6'2", 200. Sean Hardy, the second, sophomore, 6'3", 190. Janarian Bonner, redshirt freshman, 6'3". And, of course, I've got the logo up there, so let me take that off.
We'll say he's 400. And no, it's only
400 pounds. Victor Jones, 6'1", 195. I'm going to stick with those guys there.
They're going to put him at tight end.
Yeah. Victor Jones. And we'll end with that, because the rest are all going to be freshman guys. These guys, they're the ones that are probably going to get the bulk of the reps, any of the returning guys that at least here in spring. So, starting with Kemp, I think Kemp is such a game changer here. I mean, he comes here from Virginia, and he's like number 3 or 4, whatever, on their all-time receiving list. I mean, he has, a ton of stats that have already come out of, playing in the ACC now for 3 seasons. Had a chance to was thinking about going pro, and then was granted a kind of a waiver, and all the Virginia players they were on the team that had the last couple games cut short because of the players that were shot and killed on their team. So they ended up having, waiver, and he had an opportunity instead of going into the draft to go into the transfer portal, and that's why he's coming here for one more season. He also, from a special team standpoint, is a returner, but I mean, I think from a possession receiver standpoint, this guy has an opportunity he could be the leading receiver on the team next year. I mean, that's the kind of role that he has. Yeah. Not necessarily a guy that's going to stretch the field and be a burner, but somebody that's just going to make a lot of catches.
Yeah. Someone who's going to move the chains, very reliable, someone that the quarterbacks are going to trust. But we've seen, Marcus Washington, like to your point, has shown some flashes to be another type of wide receiver one. Interesting to see what Fleeks actually does here. It seems like this is just a new lease on life for him. And IGC started red hot last year, and obviously something happened there between him and the coaching staff and all that type of stuff. And then, of course, you've got Xavier Betts back on the team, and that could be the guy that does stretch the field, right?
Yeah. Today on Husker Online, they had posted something about what they had heard with Betts, that he's up to like 208 pounds. I think he'd gain 18 pounds and is faster than he's ever been. So, has had a really good offseason with that. And, look, it's never been an athletic issue with Betts. That's never been the problem. And so if, it's all about all the other things that they've talked about this offseason being with someone like Betts, is that making sure that are you bought in? Are you all into football? And if you are, holy smokes. I mean, that guy, we've seen glimpses of what that guy can do too. Marcus Washington, like you mentioned last year, I mean, there were times where, he was able to kind of take over a game for us, and he had opposite him, he had Palmer. So that's going to be the challenge for him next year is, maybe he is the number one guy next year. Maybe he takes over Palmer's role and has a guy like Kemp opposite him, getting some catches too. I don't know. IGC, we saw him for one game, against Northwestern, really have just an outstanding game, caught the first touchdown pass of the season. And then, 3 games later, he was quitting it. So I don't know what to make out of him yet. I think it's way too, it's early for me I'm just not sure what stock to put into him yet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Rob, looking on the other side of the screen here on the second column, obviously Coleman kind of stands out there, someone that could be an early contributor. Is there anyone else out there that you're looking at that you'd like to see catching a few balls this year?
I think the one name, if I recall, and I'm trying to remember from looking at this, and I think Jaden Doss was the one kid that I think that they have coming in. Again, it's so hard to tell. Like, I don't even know if Coleman's going to contribute this year. Maybe he will, but I think it was between like him and Doss. Am I? God, I'm so bad at this with these because all these names.
That's all right. Doss is the one from the KC area, I think. Right?
Yeah, and I think that was the one
from Lincoln High.
Yeah, I believe that it was Doss was the one that they were talking about could come in, and that he was kind of like a last minute. They were really surprised that he signed with the team. I think that was him.
No.
Who am I? Not right.
No, he's been around for a while, but.
Oh, he'd been around. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to remember all these kids because
that's all right. Point is, I guess, Rob. Yeah. Rob is. I think you've actually illustrated my point pretty well. Is that we're probably not expecting a lot from the freshmen outside of probably Malachi Coleman, who may be an early contributor, but a lot of the other guys are probably going to need a little bit of seasoning before they contribute, right?
I did have a question on Coleman though, because I know that we said like he's not on campus. Obviously, he's in Lincoln. But is he still able to go over and like work out at all, anything, because he's not enrolled yet, or is he because he's still in high school, like, or is he allowed to like go and be in the gym and be around the teammates? What are the rules on that?
You could go to practices, you can watch practices, things like that. At this point, he's not a recruit anymore, so
yeah,
he could be around as much as he can be around. Now,
like, what about like weight room and stuff? Because I swear I saw him in a weight room video, but I don't know that they. Him. Like,
I think when it comes to like things like that, the coaches can send them like weight lifting plans and food plans and stuff. But I don't think you're doing anything official until you're actually on campus enrolled and everything. So, this gets into some of the weeds of the details there. But as far as like when I look at that right column and specifically the true freshman guys, Coleman, he definitely brings a different body type and everything than what we have right now. I mean, he's a big, tall, mismatched, fast kid. Now, Jalen Lloyd and Bryce Turner, those two guys are track guys, but they are probably development guys. So they would be examples of, it's going to be probably a year or two, most likely, before you'd start seeing them really contribute. And they might be contributing in ways on special teams before they would even on the offense. Janarin Bonner he's a really interesting guy for me. So he is the bigger body guy. He's 6'3" and 200 there, but he's the kid from, was it Georgia last year, I think? And or was it Louisiana? I can't remember, but it was where Joseph got him right at the very end. Big 4-star, recruit. And so, he's redshirted. He's back now. And a lot of people probably thought that he was going to take off when Joseph wasn't here anymore. And the fact that he's still here going through spring ball, it'll be interesting to see, if he's able to start getting his, himself into some of the different sets and some of the positions there. So there's size, there's speed. This is it's a deep room. There's some experience there. I mean, Kemp and Washington and Betts. I mean, these guys have, a lot of, seasoning under them. They played quite a bit. When I think of Fleeks, I think of I kind of go back to the first year of Frost when Trey Neal, when they brought him here as a defensive back that he had been at UCF, he was brought really to be kind of a culture guy and someone that could help, expedite the teaching and just with this new, kind of be a coach on the field. And if nothing else, if that's what Fleeks ends up being, I think that's a role that can be used here as we're going through a transition year.
Fleeks essentially, he played with Garrett McGuire, right? I mean, they are on the same
probably
team.
Roommates, yeah.
Well, and that's a good point, Dave. This is a group this is the one being coached by Coach McGuire, not Coach McGee, as I kept calling him a couple weeks ago.
Fleeks and Kemp are the same age, practically.
Well, yeah. Well, isn't like Drake's basketball team older than half the NBA ones? I mean, that's happening all the time anymore. So, you just
that's right.
You just go with it. COVID years, who knows?
Older than 5 NBA teams. I think I going back because I was at Billy Kemp was the one I think I've heard him compared to like Torrey a lot as far as like what he'd be able to contribute for this team.
Yeah, I can see that. A little different body type. Torrey's taller, obviously, but Kemp's definitely more of a possession guy who eventually could catch a lot of passes, but maybe not have quite as many yards per catch.
And when you think about the last 2 years, Torrey and then Palmer, those are examples where we've been able to have a transfer come in and be a significant player, not just not play a small role, but be the leading guy. And so again, with Kemp, it may not be the most yards per catch and he may not even have the most yards, but I think he would be a top candidate going into the season to be the most receptions at least. And that is something that he did a lot of at Virginia. I know a guy on Twitter that we've been going back and forth a little bit, Who's Football, HOOS. And I've asked him so he's a big Virginia fan. I asked him about Billy Kemp and just, give me your evaluation. And that was the first thing he said. He's like, tough kid and great kid. And he's going to catch everything thrown at him. Doesn't have burner speed, but he has, all the other intangibles you want. And so, and then the other thing is the special team side of it. He's gonna, he can return punts, he can return kicks and actually do more than Santino Panico and just fall forward. So anything that a player can do like that at that position too, to start to change and flip the field. My goodness, that's something we haven't had in 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah.
Probably since DeMornay personnel. So,
yeah, that's a good point. Boomer, who would you got guys here that could be forming a 4x100 track team right here, right? I mean, like, who do you think's the fastest on this list?
That I don't know. We'd have to break out the GPS stats for it. That is something Rule's known for, is trying to find those, track speedster types and teach them the game of football. And, just looking at these columns, it's just interesting to see how young a lot of it is. I mean, there's so many, you have 3 seniors, 2 juniors, a couple of sophomores, and then everything else are redshirt freshmen and freshmen.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
good opportunity to get some players in here and mold them into what you want and hopefully get a lot of production out of them. So, and that just shows why you had to go out and get some people like Fleeks and Kemp, because there just wasn't a whole lot of other experience to fall back on.
Yeah, and Garcia,
and Castaneda coming back, and
that's a great
Marcus Washington.
Somebody said today that Betts is stronger and actually like has improved in his speed. Like he's the fastest he's ever been. And that's huge too, because that show that he's like that commitment that Rule was talking about, right? Like we're coming in and working out and putting in the practice and the time.
Sure.
Sounds like he's doing that. So that's a positive, I think.
Yeah.
Looking
I'd love to see the coaching staff really, with all the speed here, actually really push that competition, right? Like, let's say who is the fastest? I want them to actually try to really, really prove it, especially like, real football speed too. It should be interesting.
And I will say, Boomer, I think, made a really good point there. I'd probably I'm taking it for granted right now that Betts and Castaneda, IGC, are back. But look at this list right now and take those two guys off it. And that changes things completely. I mean, we needed that.
Yeah.
A little bit of age and a little bit of depth there. And if I have to throw out the wild card on that, to me, it is Betts, because he's somebody that obviously, we just assumed was done with Nebraska. And for him to come back, if he's anything potentially like he was 2 years ago, and if he's even better, this guy, he could be the best receiver. He could be the top reception, top, yardage guy, top touchdown. He could be the top everything if he's focused that way. And so a lot of talent for Coach McGuire to work with, and it'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, it's always amazing to see these different career trajectories, right? And everybody can ultimately maybe reach their destination in different ways. And the fact is that in my mind, recruiting wise, Xavier Betts is always tied to Xavier Watts. Watt, who came out of Nebraska, same time, went to Notre Dame. I think I saw him post. I mean, he's going to the NFL draft, I want to say, right? He was like already a career done at Notre Dame, essentially. and Betts feels like he's just beginning, right? But it doesn't mean that Betts may not make it to the NFL as well. So should be interesting. All right, let's see what else we have here. And we're looking at tight ends here. And this is another really intriguing room that has gotten much larger and hopefully healthier, right, Honky?
Yep. Coached by Bob Wager, the new tight ends coach who came straight from high school, Arlington Martin High School in Texas. The roster 2023 starts with Chris Hickman on top here, junior, 6'5", 215. Now, I did read something that said that maybe he hasn't been around the team as much the last couple of weeks. I don't know. We'll find out more in spring ball, but he's still listed. James Carney, sophomore, 6'5", 225. Thomas Fedoni, today was speaking, and we've got a video of him in a little bit here, 6'6", 235. And then Eric Gilbert, that's the transfer, the sophomore, 6'6", 260. Jesus. And that's the transfer there, and he is from Georgia. Now, Fedoni, by the way, just to be clear here, this says 235. He was asked about that today. He said he's 255 right now. So just to put that in perspective, he's 6'6", 255. Gilbert's listed at 6'6", 260. And those two guys were both in the same recruiting class, and they were both pretty much the number one, number two tight ends in that class that year nationally. So there's talent there. A.J. Rollins, sophomore, 6'6", 220 from Omaha. Chase Androff, the redshirt freshman, 6'6", 235 from Minnesota a year ago. And he's pretty much he was also listed at 255 after the holidays.
Sorry.
That's probably not too far off. Brody Tagaloya, redshirt freshman, 6'3", 260. And then Isaiah Smith Flores, the freshman. Now, he's not here yet, but he's the one that Ismail. And he's the one from Arlington Martin, played for Bob Wager there in Texas, and is the Iowa legacy. His dad is in like the Iowa Hall of Fame. So he's 6'4", 230.
Yeah.
That's right. And did I say Isaiah? Jeez. Yeah, it's hard to read after this long. So anyways, you're seeing a lot of height, a lot of size. It's a big room, period. It's a big room with 8 guys. But this is an area where I think if we could start to see some differential things that they would do X's and O's wise, it could start in this room. Some more 2 tight end sets. I've even heard 3 tight end sets. And some of these guys are athletic enough to where you could conceivably see 2 or 3 of them out there, but not all in those positions. You could see a Fedoni lined up, as a split back, and he even mentioned, getting into a running back position. He's watched some of the video of Coach Rule's offenses in the past where they've had tight ends doing multiple things. So it's very interesting to see what they're going to do with this room.
Yeah, he said he wanted to be the best tight end in the country this year, and you said he's 255, Honky, but I mean, I think 20 pounds of him right now is that hair. Did you see that? I mean, my Lord.
Well, here,
Yeah. Do you have video? I bet you have to have video of this, right?
Yeah, here. I'll watch the video here of his hair, and then also watch. This is where he talks about what some of the offenses that they've done at the position. So this is an interesting watch.
Right when he got hired, the first thing I had to do, I turned on the tape. They have a tight end, Jaheim Bell. They have Austin Stogner, Atkins. And really, I can see myself in all three of those positions. Austin Stogner is more, obviously he's a receiving tight end, but he's definitely more of a, blocking tight end, where they have Jaheim Bell, he's a receiving tight end. He can line up with a running back. They'll do fun plays with him, reverses, screens. So I can see myself doing those things, but I can also see myself in the trenches, getting blocks, getting dirty, which I love to do. So I'm excited for that too.
He's got the classic man bun going on there. Gives a couple extra heights. He's probably 6'8" with that, right? Too. So
7'2".
Yeah, that's like Fletch is like 6'6", 6'9" with the afro. Yeah, I don't know whatever that would be called that Fedoni has there, but. I mean, you hear about what some of the previous offenses have done under Coach Rule, and talking about tight end reverses and screen passes and doing lining them up in different positions, hand in the ground, turf, being a down line blocker, and being someone that's split out. And so there's a lot of different options there, and you can see the body types here. Chase Androff. I mean, he was a glorified offensive tackle in high school up there in Minnesota. They threw the ball only a handful of times. And so, he didn't get recruited because of his receiving stats, but he's a tough nosed Big Ten kind of blocker. And so there's different guys here, different body types, I think, that we can throw out there, but the conversation starts with the guy who we just showed, Fedoni, and Eric Gilbert, the transfer from Georgia. I mean, those are two high caliber recruits at the position, and they're a few years out of high school now. So, I mean, physically these guys have got the builds. There's something to build around just those two guys. And we said with running back, how nice it would be to get two guys on the field at the same time. Those would be two guys on the field who mismatches and everything. That'd be nice to get on the field at the same time.
Yeah. And Gilbert, his freshman year at LSU, where it was a COVID year, had a really good shortened season there. And things just didn't play out quite the same. Georgia, who has also had a very deep tight end room, but it's interesting. It's different, but Nebraska's actually done pretty well with tight ends over the last few years, right? I mean, with Jack Stoll, Austin Allen, Vokalek, and having success at the next level too. So hopefully that continues, and a little bit of a tight end U here at some point.
Yeah, the size on this. For this tight end room too, it looks like the offensive line for some FCS schools as well. I mean, honestly, I'm not even joking when I say that, because there's an FCS school right down the street from me, and I've seen their offensive line, and and if any of these guys are looking to transfer after spring, I know a really good.
No, we want to keep all of them, Rob.
We do. I know. I'm just
all right.
I can
read. And it's again just another interesting case of just kind of youth, and just we didn't have a whole lot of actual on-field experience from a lot of these guys. Again, showing why someone like Eric Gilbert was an important guy to bring on. I mean, had one great year. Didn't really play last year or 2 years ago, and then didn't do a lot at Georgia. But we all know Fedoni's got the talent and the reputation, but unfortunately just hasn't been able to see a whole lot of field. And I think Hickman's played a few downs, hasn't he?
Hickman's actually, if he's back, will have by far the most experience at Nebraska.
And they kept playing. Hickman, they kept moving him from receiver to tight end and back to receiver. I think that stunted a lot of his development early on there. But I mean, you're absolutely right, Boomer. Again, take the transfer out of this, take Gilbert out, and this room looks very different. Again, so there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of talent, I would say, out there in this room. But this spring, you can tell why this spring is so important, is because, I mean, these guys, if you take the collective stats of this room, it's probably not very impressive. So there's a lot of potential, but it's kind of unseen potential yet, or unwitnessed at least. So we'll see what it looks like. This will be a fun group to watch in the spring game, because this will be some of their first chances to get out there in front of, hopefully 70, 80,000 people and chance to kind of make a play. A.J. Rollins last year in the spring game, he was one of them that made a big catch. I think at a part where they were still playing real football at that time, and that was like one half that they were doing it before the 2-hand touch, in shorts. So
yeah, absolutely. All right, well, it's going to be interesting. You're right. I do think the spring game could be a big part of determining who is playing here at tight end. Do you think they're going to take Fidone kind of easy here in the spring? I mean, just a risk factor right now too.
He was asked about that today, and he flat out. It was almost an awkward answer, because he was like, he could have played last year. In fact, there were some coaches, or he wouldn't say who. There were some people that are like, why aren't you getting out there? But then it was, well, I'm not cleared, and it got weird.
Yeah.
But
there was that article that you had, Honky, where he was interviewed. Was it on JoJo's podcast last year? And like, he got really like emotional. I remember listening to it. He got really emotional, like, while doing that, because it really seemed like he wanted to play.
Well, and let's think about it just for a second. Put yourself in the guy's position. I mean, he's hurt. He's had 2 knee injuries now in 2 years. I mean, just awful to see. And so, I think they were going to do whatever they could last year to be, or certainly they needed to do whatever they needed last year. He thought he could play by the end of last season or during last season, but it was, I'm sure, in his best interest to not do that. At this point, it sounds like he's 100%. He's ready to go. And so, I'll defer back to what Coach Rule said earlier with the physicality in practice, and
right.
The health of the team is at the utmost importance to him. I'm sure that's how they'll approach it with Fidone. But and at the end of the day, just like with any of these other guys on the team, at some point you're going to have to start taking hits again if you're going to get out there on the field. And so you're going to have to get prepared in practice for what you're going to see on Saturdays.
Yeah, and if there's one guy that he can take inspiration from too, would be JoJo, right? Because JoJo had a couple injuries as well, and
sure,
look at him; he's an NFL player. So I mean, there's a lot of positives to look forward to, because there are plenty of examples of kids in his situation that have come back and been very productive and had great careers. So
absolutely,
yeah, they reconstruct a knee better.
There's that Kool-Aid
than before.
There's the Kool-Aid, Rob.
All right. Well, let's wrap this up with offensive line, and obviously another big list, Honky, and a lot of intrigue here. We do have some more experience. What do we expect to see out of this offensive line here in the spring?
Yeah, so the only position group on the entire team that has a coach returning. So Donovan Raiola worked with these guys last year, and it starts with the 5 juniors here. Bryce Benhart, 6'9", 315. Turner Corcoran, 6'6", 300. Newuli is 6'4", 315. Ethan Piper, 6'2", 295. Ben Scott, the transfer from Arizona State, multiple year starter there. He was a center, but he's also played tackle. Basically, he could play any of the positions. 6'5", 300. So the 5 juniors. After that, you have a couple of sophomores. Henry Lutovsky, 6'6", 310 from Iowa, and he's played quite a bit now, starting with last year. Teddy Prohaska, the Omaha kid, 6'10", 320. All the talent in the world, all the potential in the world, but he just hasn't been able to keep healthy for 2 seasons. And then we get to the right side, and we do have the transfer from Georgia, Jacob Hood, redshirt freshman, 6'8", 345. And then Justin Jenkins is a redshirt freshman. He was on the team last year, 6'1", 290. And then the rest are all true freshmen, guys that 4 of them are Nebraska kids: Mason Goldman, Gunnar Gotchula, Brock Knudsen, and Sam Sledge. And then Jason Majijic, and I'll screw up that last name until
I don't know. Say it again.
Majijic, and he's from Pierre, South Dakota. So those 5 guys. Probably not going to be as big of players on the team next year, but if we stick over here on the left side of the column, the first thing that comes to my mind is that I feel like a broken record, because we've said this now multiple years in a row, but there's talent, right? I mean, let's go back to the recruiting rankings. If they mean anything, Teddy Prohaska, Bryce Benhart, Turner Corcoran, all three of these guys were top 100 recruits. Army All-American guy like, Bryce Benhart. These are guys that, that they don't come with a lack of recruiting bells and whistles. From a size standpoint, if Frost liked anything, he liked size. So Benhart is 6'9", and Prohaska is 6'10". I mean, this looks like a basketball team, and big dudes. But it's about staying healthy, and this is one of the rooms where I'm really interested to see if strength and conditioning can make a big difference. A little bit of the bend. I think we looked stiff on the O-line last year. That affected us in pass protection. It affected us, I think, some of our run blocking as well. But can we get some bend in these guys? There's I'm not ready to just toss out Benhart and say he's done. I mean, this is a guy, if this guy can man the right tackle spot, my goodness, that opens up a whole lot of options. So I don't know, Dave, I'll just start there. I mean, there's a lot of options as I look at this group.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be interested to see if they actually try to play around with some of those lineups really and move guys around. Even heard Ben Scott, we've always just locked him in a center, but maybe that's not the case, right? And Newelly was a big miss last year, right? I mean, he had really emerged with Teddy 2 years ago as quite the tandem there, and him being out had a big impact on the lineup. So it's a little bit of a reset, and some guys like Benhart and Turner have a chance to kind of reestablish themselves as with some of that hope that they had as they started their careers here.
Yeah, last year I had Rob Zaska on the show right before the season started, and he highlighted two guys that just kind of out of the blue, they just happen to both be on the O-line, but he's like, there's two guys on the team that I think could play right now at a Georgia, and he threw Georgia out as the team. And he said Prohaska, if he's healthy, and then he goes Newelly, and he was bringing up Newelly because it was just at that point it just happened like a week earlier that he was suspended for the week or for the season. So he was like, that was a big loss, and I was a little bit shocked to hear, you think Newelly is that good? He's like, oh yeah, that guy is a road grader. I mean, it's a big loss that he thought we didn't have Newelly. And then Prohaska, if he can just stay healthy, but that those two guys would be good enough to play at Georgia. So fast forward to today to have both of those guys hopefully healthy, hopefully ready to go, and then throw Jacob Hood on top of that, a 6'8", 345 transfer from Georgia, who was a top recruit too. Now I think Hood, I'm really interested to see him this spring because all I've heard is this is a great big guy, a ton of talent, ton of recruiting hype, but also definitely a project. So I really want to see what that project looks like. I mean, there's a reason they brought him in. Now, I guess we'd be remiss if we didn't bring up the fact that this is the room that missed on a big transfer option. Walter Rouse, who, just to make this clear, if Rouse had come here, he was the transfer from Stanford, committed here, and then decommitted 17 hours later and went down to Oklahoma. But even if he had been here, he wasn't going to be here in spring either. He was coming off of an injury, so he wouldn't have been playing in spring ball either. But, as I start to kind of put guys into positions here, I'm going to say the same thing I said, I think, last season, and that is Benhart at right tackle is so huge right now because if he can man that position, it changes everything else. I think Ben Scott could be our right tackle, but could he be our center if we don't need to move him to right tackle? Teddy, if he can stay healthy, I mean, I could see Teddy playing left tackle. I could see, got to have Corcoran somewhere on here. Probably Prohaska left tackle, Corcoran, left guard, Scott at center, Newelly at right guard, and Benhart right tackle. I mean, that's kind of my scribbling.
People are really high on Latovsky, right? So I mean, you're not short of options. It's just they've got to really, to your point, kind of, definitely develop over last year. And I mean, it's the position group that could improve the most because they have some experience out there. It's not a lack of experience. It is a bit of the physical part of it, where maybe different training methods and approaches might pay dividends.
Yeah, and one thing, I mean, having Raiola as their coach again, right? Like they're going to be a little bit more into his scheme a little bit, and I think that may have played into it because honestly, this is the one position group that I think still, just year after year, still comes with the most questions, right? I mean, regardless of what we want to say, this is where it all starts, is right here in the trenches. So that's my biggest concern still. I mean, we got to this year and it's like, we're looking at this and for me, that's the biggest question mark because these are the guys that, that are going to, of where it's going to start anyway. Also, Honky, it's Machechak is how you say his name.
I'll forget
Jason
already by
Machechak.
next week, but I appreciate
He's forgotten it already. Yeah.
But Trev said it on, the day that he was firing Frost was that we have to win the trenches, and that was this area. Any success that we're going to have, it's going to ultimately start up front here. Scott's a big transfer, just like with all these other position groups we've talked about that have had a transfer. Imagine what this group looks like if Scott's not in there right now. I mean, I think Scott's a big improvement here, and where he goes is kind of dependent upon where the need is. I would say up front, the biggest need is at center, and hopefully other guys can fill in those other spots, and Scott can be that center. If not, it's not that Piper can't play center. It's not that Newley couldn't, or even Corcoran. But, hopefully at the tackle spot, I mean, what I really want to see is Benhart and Prohaska take those spots over. I mean, that's what they were brought in here for. That they're big time bookend tackles and stay healthy. And if they can live up to the billing of what they came in at, watch out. And this is the thing, of all the position groups that maybe this aligns more now, these guys' strengths with what we're switching to. Coach Rule specifically, when asked about why did he keep Raiola as a line coach, he said he coaches the style of line play that I want to run. So at the very least, I don't think we're going to see any of the craziness of a year ago where Whipple and Raiola and we're not, we're doing different things and different schemes to, what the blocking is. At least they're going to be aligned that way. And these guys are going to be, running the style of offense that we want that the coaches want, and that hopefully builds to their strengths. That's what I want to see. Lutovsky and Scott and Newley blowing people over.
Yeah, well, Honky, I tell you, it's interesting. You look at if you're watching this on YouTube, you see we have 7 guys on the left side that all have had playing experience, and then the 7 guys on the right are all the freshmen or redshirt freshmen that are kind of still work in progress. And so, I mean, if you think of it that way, you have 7 guys that really haven't proved anything yet. 7 other guys that we are talking about plugging and playing and have some experience. But 7, that means you have 5 starters and 2 backups. And to your point, if you want Benhart and Teddy as your bookends, you have Nuruddin and Corcoran as your guards and Scott as your center, then you got Piper and Lutovsky that can fill in, right? I think that makes sense. But one injury and you could be running pretty thin already. You have anybody like from a walk-on standpoint that we should be aware of, or some of the other names that I'm not thinking of? It might
no, and that was the next thing I wrote down, was that if there's an area, and that's something I want to focus on in spring. If there's an area where we've had, no doubt we have a couple of walk-on guys that could be 3rd, 4th year players that could add to this. So the only people on this list right now are just scholarship players. What should also be noted, and you brought this up, when it comes to pure numbers, Dave, we're only showing 14 guys. And if there was any position group that Coach Rule said, hey, I want a certain number at, he talked about it with O-line. He wants to be at 16. So scholarship-wise, you're looking at, a group here that's a couple short of what he wants ideally. And so when we look at some of these other position groups that, look bloated or have, quite a few more than you would normally see at it, this is one that, we want to get a couple up to. So I know we have that 100+ scholarship, number right now going on, but he would like to see a few more offensive linemen in that room.
Is it possible that they go after someone in May as a transfer to add depth?
It could. It could. And I mean, they could do that at any position, for what it's worth.
But here in particular,
not just at O-line, but if they really felt that they I wonder what that number is. Not just that they want 16, but I wonder what that number is that they feel like they need to have going into camp. Like, we need to have a top 8 or a top 9, or what is that number that that we need to have this many guys that are going to play, and that we have to feel that comfortable with playing. Because let's just assume that the left side here, all 7 of those guys you feel comfortable with. Do you feel comfortable with Jacob Hood, the transfer from Georgia? Would you feel comfortable with him being an 8th guy, a 9th guy on the O-line, maybe throw in one walk-on? I mean, that's what they need to kind of work their way through. I don't know how you'd feel that about any of the incoming freshmen. I just can't even imagine that. Those guys are, there might be one that sticks out, when they get here, but for the most part, you're going to look at most of those guys as being transfers, or not transfers, walk-ons. And one thing too, we should say, I don't know, Coach Rule has talked quite a bit about position changes that he's done in the past when he's gone to someplace. So conceivably, could there be a defensive tackle that moves over to the offensive side? We'll see. I mean, there's always a surprise in spring ball that we can't predict right now. But based off just the rosters that we were looking up at this point, this is what we had.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right. Good stuff, guys. Anything else on football we need to talk about hockey?
No, I think that should do it. Next week we will get into the defensive side, and we'll get into the special teams and do the same thing, kind of go position by position. But it's a lot of fun. I can't wait to see spring practice, start reading the articles, watch spring game, all those good things. I just think that there's a lot of pieces for these guys to work with. And Dave, we mentioned it when Rule first got here, compared to some of the places that he's been in the past, namely Baylor and what he took over.
Yeah.
This is there's issues in group. It's not all roses and Kool-Aid there that he has to work with, but he has a lot to work with too. So I'm sure he's pretty happy with the rooms that he has right now.